And we are live. What is up, everybody? This is Nick from P2W Fantasy, live here on Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube, I believe. I have two great guests here with me today. Looking forward to hit a little bit different of a topic. I know a lot of the topics right now are around free agency and the rookies and all those things. I have a fun topic for today that makes us talk about some different outlooks for next year and our opinions on some different players here. But I do want to make sure I introduce the two guests that I have on the podcast here with me tonight. First, big fan of both of these guys. Starting with Jeremy. Jeremy's a good friend of mine. I actually had Jeremy on a live stream before with my buddy Fontaine and Gemmo the Icon. Jeremy plays in a league with me. He's a great follow on Twitter, talking about football and pretty much everything. I think I'm always cracking up at least once a week, twice a week, 5 times a week at some of your posts that you have, man. Before I introduce or let you introduce yourself here and where everybody can find you, I do want to congratulate this man. This guy just got married. It was last week, correct?
Last Saturday.
I just remember like clicking on Facebook and I seen you posing, fresh haircuts, tons of pictures.
I was looking good, man. I was looking good.
You were looking fresh, man. I'm not going to lie.
Thank you.
Yeah, so Jeremy, again, congratulations on that. That is awesome. Can you let everybody know just what's up with you right now and where we can find you on social media?
First off, let me say I appreciate that. Next, I'm just, working just like everybody else out here. You can find me on Twitter. Hey, Mr. Holman. If you want chaotic, follow your boy. That's what I'm here for. I'm here for the chaos. So there we go.
Awesome. We actually talk about chaos. We competed against each other in the final of a home league that we competed in this year. So that was chaos in itself. But also with us today, I have Samantha. Samantha, big influence, obviously, in the fantasy community and on Twitter. Have good content and also just very entertaining in general. So to start, I mean, I want to compliment you on the TikTok game because I myself try to use TikTok to talk about some content and things, but I am not to your level. You have some great funny videos, and then you also will do things throughout the season like waiver wires and things like that. So awesome with that content. Fantasy football, you work with the Action Network. Your resume speaks for itself. You have the New York Post, Sleepers Brawl, New York Times on your belt there. Samantha, can you tell us, of course, where we can find you and then anything you got going on or upcoming that you'd like to talk about?
Thank you so much for having me. Yeah, I've been with Action for all of, 3 or 4 weeks now. So I'm still pretty new to doing the whole thing full time, but I'm super excited about it. Obviously, I was previously with the Post and kind of doing the fantasy and NFL stuff on the side. So it's really cool to like focus full time on it. Still getting ramped up, of course. I'm writing articles, but we'll definitely be involved with like video, and I've been making TikToks and like insanity. Yeah, I mean, I thank you for the compliments about my TikToks. I think that they're really stupid a lot of the times, but I think it's supposed to make you laugh because I don't know, like everyone's kind of putting out the same content. I mean, there's obviously amazing people out there, and I'm not discounting anyone, but in the end, like sometimes it's just the finishing touch, like the little bow that you put on your stuff. So, it's the same waiver wire article that I wrote and researched for hours, and then I just kind of put it into a video. So yeah, I like it that we're kind of, as a community, getting out there on a lot of different platforms.
I respect that a lot, and I think it's important to get views and listens and things like that, to be diverse with the content. Because like myself, when I first started, all I did was articles, and I'm only like a year in, but all I did was articles, and then I kind of branched off to some live streams and things like that. But I think utilizing other forms of social media to get the same messages across, but doing it in creative ways is awesome. So I do respect you a lot for that. Before we get into our live stream here tonight, I do want to shout out the Fantasy Points Media, who I am a proud member of now. I think this is my second week being able to say that. What they have going on right now, they have a April special up until the 30th, 20% off of a subscription. You won't find a better deal with stuff all in one area. What I really like about the Fantasy Points Media, and I have the website I will plug right here on the bottom here, fantasypoints.com/subscribe. Literally, when I do a bunch of research, I used to always jump around to different sites to grab different things of information. And with the Fantasy Points media, they have everything in one spot. They just drop their rookie reviews. They have advanced stats, red zone stats, articles from different people, a ton of information all in one spot. So be sure to check that out. I have my promo code 21win10 there. Proud member of them. I want to make sure I play that little clip before we get into things here. All right. So what Samantha and Jeremy and I will be talking about tonight is scenario A or scenario B. What I'm going to do is read off a specific scenario and ask these two, what do you see as something more likely to happen? The scenario might read two things that they both disagree will not happen, but my question will be, which is more likely to happen? And we're looking ahead to 2021. And the reason I like to do this is a few different reasons. It's because I like to keep things fresh when it seems like things are repetitive right now. I also like to do it because it makes us talk about some specific topics and players when it comes to outlooks for the future and what our views are. So I thought it was a creative way to talk about some different things here. So we will get started here in 1 second.
Play to win, no fear to give. I feel but I can't forgive. I go all in this time, yeah, I won't regret. I'll pick the best on trip, they don't understand. I play to win, yeah, I play to win, I play to win. Yeah, I play to win, I play to win. Oh, play to win, I play to win. Yeah, play to win, I play to win.
Shout out to my guy, Billy Wales, for that. Jeremy, the last time you were on the podcast, I think I had the little baby intro. And I got like one copyright infringement from a TikTok, Samantha. We just talked about TikTok. I posted a TikTok to Twitter and I got a copyright mark from it, something along those lines. So had to change up the intro. No more little baby. Didn't have the rights to his music, but that'll do. All right. So scenario A versus scenario B. The first one here is going to be revolving around two different quarterbacks. So jumping into this one here, Lamar Jackson. So Lamar Jackson, 36 touchdowns in his MVP season in 2019. In 2020, he dropped off a bit. He had 26 touchdowns. Another quarterback in this situation right here, Aaron Rodgers, led the league in touchdowns this past season and had the higher passer rating. He was number 7 in the league for passing yards in his MVP season. So my question to you guys is scenario A or scenario B, which is more likely in your opinion? Lamar Jackson again leads the league in passing touchdowns in 2021, or Aaron Rodgers is again the MVP in 2021. And Samantha, we can start with you on this. What do you see as more likely?
I'm going to go with Rodgers here. So, yeah, as you mentioned, Jackson led the league in touchdowns with just 36. That's a pretty low number to be leading the league. There were 5 quarterbacks this season that threw 37 or more touchdowns, and obviously the astronomical 48 thrown by Rodgers. That's literally a 33% increase year over year. Winning the MVP in back-to-back seasons is, definitely tough, but not unheard of. The last player to do it was Peyton Manning, who won it in 2008 and 2009. Before that, it was Rodgers' predecessor, Brett Favre, who won it 3 times in a row from 1995 to 97. So I kind of think that that's also a little interesting storyline. But Vegas currently has Rodgers winning the MVP again at 8-1 odds, which are the second shortest odds. So behind Patrick Mahomes, of course. So I think that, of the two things, that's probably more likely.
Interesting. I like those facts, especially the Favre one, because it kind of goes hand in hand with this this Packers QB legacy, which I don't like to talk about a ton as a Chicago Bears fan myself. I'm sure Jeremy knows I don't bring up.
You
What's
that?
that?
Happy that they drafted Jordan Love.
You know what? I was kind of happy. On the flip side, I was asking the same questions everybody else did with, how do they not support this guy, Aaron Rodgers? We all asked that question, like in one of the deepest wide receiver classes in a while, they don't support Aaron Rodgers. And what does Aaron Rodgers do? Wins MVP. So yeah, it's crazy to me. Love those stats though. So Samantha has Aaron Rodgers again winning the 2021 MVP over Lamar Jackson throwing the most touchdowns. And again, if you are tuning in, we're just throwing out two different scenarios. We're not saying that either one of these will even happen, but we're going to say which is more likely to happen. So, Jeremy, in your opinion, will Lamar Jackson throw the most touchdowns again in 2021? Or do you think Aaron Rodgers has a better shot at being the MVP again?
I think Rodgers has the better shot of being MVP. Coming into this year, he had a injury-filled, 2019? They drafted the quarterback. People wrote him off. He comes in 2020, wins MVP. You saw how the playoff game ended. The whole restructure of the contract type of thing. Petty Aaron Rodgers is a scary Aaron Rodgers. So off of that alone, like Samantha said, like with Lamar Jackson throwing only 36 touchdown passes, like I don't think 36 touchdown passes will allow him to lead the league in touchdown passes. So off of that alone, I got to go with Aaron Rodgers.
48 this year in comparison to that 36 last year. So we got a 12 touchdown difference, which, I mean, on paper, does it seem like a ton? Maybe not, but that is. I mean, if we look at the course of a season, that is a decent amount of touchdowns for a difference. Do you think that my only thinking with this one, and I love the guys, the points that you guys brought up there. My only thinking would be if the Ravens offense continues to be efficient with getting themselves into the red zone, that maybe has an elevated chance of just being a 5, 7, 8-yard pass touchdown opportunity versus Aaron Rodgers, who might have a ton of competition in the likes of, we can go down the list of Mahomes and, Russ was in that race for a little bit last year, and there's a ton of quarterbacks that can put up some good numbers. Do you think just in general, either one of these is is harder to attain than the other one? If we just say just in general, is the MVP versus the touchdown leader harder than the other? Do you guys have any input on that before we move on?
I think the touchdown thing for Lamar is you have to look at the offense, right? The Ravens run first generally, and what they do in a draft could definitely change that. Let's say they go in a draft and they get a receiver or something like that. That could potentially change the aspect, but Lamar Jackson's running ability, he may not get Lamar Jackson could do like 56 touchdowns, right? But could be 38 passing, 18 running. There's just so much there that I don't necessarily think the passing aspect of it will get him into that high 40 number that I think he'll need to lead the league in touchdown passes.
Yeah, I would probably say that, I think the odds, they're not actual odds, but in my head, the odds of Lamar Jackson winning the MVP are higher than Lamar Jackson leading the league in passing touchdowns. Because
that's interesting.
I think he could I think that he will probably get in that 30 range. Like Jeremy said, though, I don't think it's not going to be enough to compete with Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen and other guys that are they've really elevated the league this year. So I think that it's completely different. But at the same time, I think we can absolutely see a better Lamar Jackson. It's just probably much less likely that we see it all done on kind of the passing side.
That makes total sense there. And I think what a lot of these scenario A versus scenario B situation is, you don't have to just look at the player. You have to look at the competition for what we're asking. So, great points by you guys there. Let's stay on quarterbacks here. So I have two guys. I have the 101 quarterback from this previous draft class and the 101 from this next draft class to compare here. So Joe Burrow had 13 touchdowns in 10 games this past season before his ACL injury, and he was out for the rest of the season. I think it was more than the ACL, but he missed the rest of the season after that. He had 60 touchdowns his senior year, though, at LSU, if we look at the ability just to find guys in the end zone. Trevor Lawrence had 24 touchdowns in 10 games his senior year, so they both just played 10 games this past season. He had 36 in 15 games his junior year. My question to you both is, scenario A or scenario B, Joe Burrow throws 35 touchdowns in 2021, or Trevor Lawrence throws 35 touchdowns in 2021. And Jeremy, we can start with you on this.
Oh man. I'm going to kind of go out on a limb. I'm going to say Trevor Lawrence here, right? And I'm going to say Trevor Lawrence simply because I don't know how Joe Burrow's knee is going to be. I know they want him to be ready week 1. Is he going to be ready week 1? That's part of it also. Now, I think the likelihood is that there's a better chance of both of them throwing for 35 touchdowns than just one. But if I have to pick one, I'll say Trevor. They'll be down a ton, giving him more opportunities to throw the ball. So that's how I feel on that.
Yeah, it's interesting to hear when it comes to Joe Burrow because the front office says often we're pretty optimistic that he's going to play week 1. I think when it comes to releasing information, especially when your competition is listening to this information, they're not going to come out and say, we think he's going to be ready, but probably like not right away, maybe like week 3 or something along those lines. So it's tough to understand what the actual timetable is because I think the optimism that they talk about is always going to be week 1, regardless if it's true or not. So Samantha, Joe Burrow or Trevor Lawrence, scenario A, scenario B, who throws 35 touchdowns in 2021?
I think I'm going to go opposite here. I don't think either scenario is super likely to happen, but of them, I think I'm going to go Joe Burrow. I think there are too many variables. When you started out comparing all the stats and everything, it's a lot to make that jump from playing at Clemson to playing in the NFL. I mean, Justin Herbert broke the record previously set by Baker Mayfield for the most passing touchdowns in a rookie season with 31. I mean, he did that in a system that I think is a lot better than the Jaguars too. I certainly think that, like, I'm not saying that it can't happen, but I would put more of my trust, even with the injury concerns, in Burrow. He was on a pretty slow 16-game pace to throw touchdowns. He was hampered by a number of things, obviously offensive line, a lot of issues. I mean, you don't go from being like a 2-win team to being a playoff team in one season. So that was going to take a little time anyway. I think it is, but I think that also is a testament to how hard it is to excel in your rookie season. We were talking about him as this generational talent. We're now talking about Trevor Lawrence as this generational talent. They could still have like sluggish first years, and that's not an indictment on their whole career. So I think that since he makes the necessary improvements to their O-line, they already got, I feel like hopefully they'll make some improvements at least during the draft, because that was obviously a huge pain point. Joe Burrow can't throw 35 touchdowns from his back, but I'm going to go with Burrow.
It was interesting too, because I saw a graphic and it said, because there's been talk about Jamar Chase is being requested by Joe Burrow to be drafted by the Bengals. And the graphic showed Sewell, the number 1 offensive lineman in this draft class. And it showed Sewell, anybody else as a receiver. So the receiver was anybody else. And Joe Burrow was making the completion. Everything was good. He was blocking. And then it showed Joe Burrow with anybody else being the offensive lineman as he was getting sacked, not being able to throw the ball to Jamar Chase. So I agree that he needs to be protected to do much of anything. And I know that, and this is a little bit off topic, but when it comes to Joe Burrow, I know that he might be requesting to be reunited with that college teammate, but at the same time, this guy just got injured so bad, like you need to protect him. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see if they do have a full season between the both of them, what the ceiling looks like. Both teams still are going to be hurting on the other side of the ball. So the game scripts are definitely going to be in play for them. But yeah, I think both guys, it's kind of up in the air. Like you said, Samantha, just because they did it in college doesn't mean that right away in the NFL that they have the even opportunity to throw for a league leading or a top 5 sort of touchdown season. So good points all around right there. I want to shift over now to some running back questions here. So we knocked out some quarterback questions. We might come back to some other ones later on in this podcast, but have an interesting one when it comes to running backs and catching the ball. So Alvin Kamara and Austin Eckler, no bias just because the jersey's somewhere back here. But Kamara, 81 receptions, 2017, 2018, and 2019. He was Mr. Consistent when it came to catching 81 catches. 83 in 2020, though. Austin Eckler, 54 catches in 10 games. So he was on pace for around 86 this past season, but we have to be careful with on pace because it doesn't mean that that's what would happen. He had 92 receptions, though, in 2019. So my question to you guys is, Alvin Kamara leads the league in running back receptions in 2021, or Austin Eckler leads the league in running back receptions in 2021? I had a lot of L's and R's all in that one sentence there. Got it out, though. Samantha, who is your pick here?
I am going to go with Kamara. So I think that there is a little bit of a risk by saying Kamara just because we don't exactly know how this quarterback competition is going to pan out. I mean, if it's Taysom Hill, that certainly does impact Kamara's fantasy value pretty badly. I want Jameis Winston so badly. He's like the fantasy gift that just keeps on giving. And I'm like so excited. I would love to see him with Thomas. I would love to see him with Kamara. But anyway, all that aside, I think Eckler has more of a speckled injury history as well. And even they're both 16 game paces combined, puts Kamara has the slight edge over Eckler there. So I'm going to give it to Kamara.
All right. And the thing with Jameis too, just on a side note, he can see now. He can see a lot better than he can before. So that might be a game changer there if he gets the opportunity here. So only time will tell there. Personally, from a fantasy standpoint, I do hope that it is Winston because I think the upside of everybody else in that system will be elevated with him in comparison to Taysom Hill. But that's just me, and that's for another podcast if we got some comments debating. But again, do appreciate everybody in the comments. A lot of people chiming in on all these questions. I love to see that. So, Jeremy, when it comes to Alvin Kamara or Austin Eckler, who is leading the league in 2021 if it is one of these two guys?
So, personal bias of being a Chargers fan aside, I am going to pick Austin Eckler. Not because I'm a Chargers fan, but because of what Samantha stated. The quarterback situation for the Saints is going to have a real factor on whether or not Kamara can, be in that conversation, right? So in the 4 games that Taysom Hill played, Kamara had 10 catches. Now I understand that, looking at numbers, like that's kind of, but he had 7 catches one game, 1 catch, and then 2 catches. So I don't know how Taysom Hill will impact Alvin Kamara. And then you have Austin Eckler, who top number 2 pass catcher in that offense. And then with that being a higher powered offense, I just think it's set up that if Austin Eckler stays healthy, he could lead RBs and receptions this coming season. But the injury history does kind of scare me a bit there. But, in my personal, for me, I love to see Austin Eckler like 120 catches, 1,500 yards and like 16 touchdowns. That'll help our team out. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah. It sounds pretty as a Chargers fan. I'm glad you threw that note in there because it would be funny to see like the next day you just rocking all this Chargers gear and revealing it at that time. So a bunch of awesome people hopping into the chat here. Great points by both of you. I think the quarterback situation is definitely going to be an impact on Kamara. We obviously know that he's very talented. He can rush the ball. He can catch the ball. He can line up in different areas. He can score touchdowns. I mean, he's very talented. Eckler, I'm a huge Eckler fan. I'm a big truther. I'm hoping he can stay healthy. What I did like a lot about Austin Eckler, though, is Justin Herbert. There was a ton of questions surrounding if he did get the start for the Chargers, what that would mean for him, because they didn't look at Justin Herbert based off of his college film and say, hey, this guy's a big dump it off to the running back sort of guy. But the way that Austin Eckler gets used in this offense, we saw 2 games this past season where Austin Eckler caught 11 passes from Justin Herbert. So I love that upside and I love the tie because I had some concerns about will he throw the ball to Austin Eckler or not. And it was evident in those games. So a lot of factors, though, that you guys brought up for both running backs. And I think that just goes to say that there always are these factors of health, QB situation, the outlook of the team, where they are in games. A lot of factors determine the outlook of pass catching running backs. I mean, we can look at a guy like McKissick. J.D. McKissick was, I think, the number 1 pass catcher in the league this past season. Will he be next season? I don't know. A lot of different factors now. So good points there. Let's talk about some rookies as we get into our next point here. Again, awesome people hopping in the chat there. What's up, John? Got Troy, Martin, Dave, and LQ, Robbie from Rumboys. Awesome people in the chat. So the two scenarios I have here, let's look at some running backs and wide receivers for this next class. I mentioned at the beginning that everybody's talking about the rookies, so of course I have to talk about something related to rookies in this podcast just to keep the times fresh here. But scenario A, an incoming rookie running back finishes ahead of both Najee Harris and Javonte Williams in year one. So both of those two guys. So some other running back from this class finishes ahead of them in fantasy. Or an incoming rookie wide receiver finishes ahead of Jamar Chase, Devonta Smith, and Rashad Bateman in year one for fantasy finishes. So Jeremy, is it more likely that somebody not in those two running backs finishes ahead? Or is it more likely that out of the three wide receivers I named, that another rookie wide receiver finishes ahead of all three? A little bit of a bounce around question there, but hopefully the points across.
I'm going to say more likely a running back finishes ahead of Najee Harris and Williams. But I'm not. I think the only back that could would be Travis Etienne, but that also depends on the team that he goes to. So, and the other two backs, all depends on where they go. But I'll say running back. I think Etienne might have the best chance of having the highest workload week one with where I think he's going to end up. And then that way that'll give him that edge to outpace the other two. Second half of the season, probably not, but I think he'll start week one, or at least have the higher workload and stuff, and that'll be able to pace him out over the other two over the course of the season. So
it'll definitely be interesting too with the running backs, because there are some very pretty spots. I mean, Pittsburgh would be very nice. Arizona Cardinals would be very nice for running back to land to. But also,
Atlanta would be a good spot for somebody to land.
Yeah, to pair with Mike Davis. But you never know when it comes to the draft. I mean, we've been surprised before. We were surprised last year at who went at what pick, and who else is in that depth chart. Samantha, do you believe it's more likely that, and I'll just say it in short, out of the two top running backs I just named, that a running back finishes above these two in fantasy, or that a wide receiver not named Chase, Smith, or Bateman finishes ahead of all three of those guys in fantasy for 2021?
I'm going with Jeremy here. I'm going to take the running back side. Obviously, this is kind of just without obviously knowing where any of these five guys are going. I think the landing spots are just going to be more important at the running back position versus at wide receiver. They could really end up in a very crappy running back by committee situation. And that stuff does change a lot more too. So that kind of makes it even a more volatile situation, I feel like, than receiver. But yeah, I mean, I think there's a very real chance that, neither of them are really big fantasy contributors right off the bat. Meanwhile, we saw just a lot of randomness. We saw guys like James Robinson and Antonio Gibson and just perform, whereas we saw, I don't want to say CEH was a disappointment, but certainly there were people taking him top 5 in redraft.
Oh man, super high.
Right. So there's a lot more randomness, I think. So I think that there could be some guy, maybe it's ETN, maybe it's just some random person that ends up ahead of Harris and Williams. But I think it's more likely that happens versus the wide receiver class, which is super, super strong this year.
I love those points, because it makes me think, because my immediate answer when I was writing this was I thought it was a wide receiver because of the depth of the class and the amount of guys that can finish ahead of these three. I mean, Chase, Smith, and Bateman, we can look down the list: Rondale Moore, Waddle, Elijah Moore, Terrace Marshall, St. Brown, Wallace, Tony, Dynamite Brown. There's a long list of guys that maybe just take off in the right spot. So that was my original thinking. But I like what you guys are bringing up about the opportunity to be in a good spot to do so. And Samantha, you just talked about the likes of James Robinson and Antonio Gibson, who you really didn't expect to be that high before the season started, but did. So do you guys think that the running back potential to land in a spot that gives them enough volume is more likely to produce fantasy value than having a wide receiver or multiple wide receivers due to the depth of the position? So is that kind of where you guys are getting at when it comes to running back versus wide receiver? And either one of you guys can chime in with that.
I guess what my thought process was that like both of those guys, Harris and Williams, could just like have almost zero fantasy value if they end up in a bad spot, if they're in like a 3-headed committee or something like that. Whereas I think we've seen guys like Justin Jefferson and like the Adam Thielen situation where they can very much overcome, I think, situations like that, where it's, I think, harder for running back situations. So I just think there's more randomness introduced. Other spots will open up kind of randomly too, like with Leonard Fournette leaving the Jaguars, and that kind of like open it up for James Robinson, or like CMC gets hurt and Mike Davis ends up as a top 10 running back or something for fantasy. So there's just kind of more randomness. And I guess that would be my thought process.
Makes sense.
I'm kind of on the same thing with Samantha there. Like, I just think that if with the running backs, like if you end up having a back that comes in and they're in a timeshare, a lot of times you see with coaches, they don't like to use rookie running backs. Like the first look with Cam Akers, right? Cam Akers, yes, he ended up getting hurt, but he was part of that timeshare. DeAndre Swift in Detroit, like they want to, for whatever reason, they want the backs to prove themselves, right? So I just think that if you have a situation like that, it's easier to lead into itself that both of those running backs get put in that position in comparison to a Jamar Chase, Devontae Smith, Rashad Bateman, like coming in, and as you saw with Justin Jefferson, like you can have two stud receivers and they can both produce at a high fantasy level in comparison to running back.
Makes sense there. And just poking the bear of jokes on Twitter, we mentioned Cam Akers. Be careful saying sup to Cam Akers, because that's frowned upon by the trolls of Twitterverse here. But let's move on to the tight end position here, and the wide receiver position, and the number 3. The number 3 is good here. So number 3 is good because it relates to 2 players here that I have on the list. I have TJ Hawkinson. He finished as the tight end 3 for fantasy. And Stephon Diggs finished as the tight end 3 for the wide receiver position in 2020. Hawkinson, weeks 1 through 16, was 143 points away from Travis Kelce, who was the tight end 1. Stephon Diggs, weeks 1 through 16, was 27.8 points away from Devontae Adams, who was the wide receiver 1 there. Obviously, the wide receiver position, like we just alluded to, is a bit deeper than the tight end position, but many factors to this. So my question to you guys is scenario A versus scenario B, and we can start with Samantha again. Who is more likely to finish as number 1 in 2021 for their position, TJ Hawkinson or Stephon Diggs? Samantha, what's your thoughts?
I'm going with Stephon Diggs here. Obviously, they're both in the mix and playing at a very high level at both at their respective positions. Diggs finished as the leader in receiving yards, and I just loved what the Bills did last year. While I could see a situation where Josh Allen could take a step backwards just because it was such a crazy leap from one year over the next, I think whatever that attrition would be is a lot less than the downgrade at quarterback that Hawkinson is getting, given that he now has to catch passes from Jared Goff. So he finished also as tight end 4 with Kittle being injured for like most of the year. And obviously like that could happen again, or Travis Kelce gets injured in like week 1 or something. But I do think like he is a top tier tight end, but his ceiling is not tight end 1. I don't see that happening, especially in the Lions system.
And just a quick note, what's up to Commissioner Breeze? Have Martin in the chat. Emmanuel in the chat. Great people again in the chat. Thank you guys for tuning in. Samantha, just going off your point there with the receiving yards and leading in receptions too, we've seen Diggs lead the league for his position, lead all positions for those categories. So I think you used the word ceiling. I think that's the perfect word to use for this if you are standing on the Stephon Diggs side. But before I give my opinion on this, I want to see what Jeremy thinks. Jeremy, scenario A or B, TJ Hawkinson finishes as the tight end 1 in 2021, or Stephon Diggs finishes as the wide receiver 1 in 2021. And again, if you guys are listening, we are not saying that either one is going to happen. We're just saying which is more likely to happen.
So it's easily going to be Stephon Diggs. And I will say that by saying this. If TJ Hawkinson finishes as the tight end 1 this fantasy season, everybody who is watching this right now, tweet at me and I will give you $5. I will Venmo you $5. That is how.
You better be careful. You better be careful because injury. You better put an injury clause in this because if a bunch of guys get hurt and then everybody's texting you, you're gonna have to get a new Twitter, man.
Here you go. If George Kittle, Travis Kelce, and Darren Waller all get hurt, then I deserve this. So
okay, fair enough.
But I also, but main reasoning behind that, right? Even if Josh Allen, because Josh Allen played out of his mind this past season, right? So even if Josh Allen necessarily doesn't take a step back to 2019 Josh Allen, but is in between 2019 and 2020 Josh Allen, he's still better than I think what Jared Goff would be. And so Stephon Diggs is still his number one option, like in that offense. Stephon Diggs could conceivably be number 1, like wide receiver 1 this year. There's a path to that happening. Jared Goff, man, no shot at Jared Goff, but
he listens every now and then, so be careful too with that. But
I just don't think that the ceiling for Hawkinson, I think is 4. I don't think he's getting any higher than 4. If one of the 3 get hurt, yeah, but I don't see it. It's Diggs.
Do you guys? Here's a side question. Just thinking about some of the points you guys make, I'm just thinking of some other questions related to this. Do you think the ceiling of the quarterback has a ton to do with the overall finish? Let's say the potential to finish as a top 3 player in a position is directly related to the ceiling of a quarterback. For instance, Davante Adams, Aaron Rodgers was the MVP. Davante Adams was the wide receiver 1. Stephon Diggs was the wide receiver 3. Josh Allen was one of the MVP candidates. Patrick Mahomes throws the ball to Tyreek Hill. Same sort of thing. He throws it to Kelce. Same sort of thing. Do you think the quarterback is directly related to the overall ceiling of a player finishing that high? Or is it more player who we're talking about? Is it more based on them? And any thoughts on that?
I think it's just a number of things. That's a very strong factor in it. You're going to have a ceiling if you're catching passes from an anemic quarterback type situation. But at the same time, Allen Robinson finished as wide receiver 10 in catching passes from one of the worst quarterback carousel situations. And, we saw Amari Cooper finished with over 1,000 yards. CeeDee Lamb finished with almost 1,000 yards. So they can put it together. You can make it work, but certainly it really helps if you're catching passes from Aaron Rodgers. That's just going to elevate your status no matter what.
Right. It helps if you're catching passes from elite guys, right? But on the Allen Robinson thing, Allen Robinson, I believe, was a top 5 to 10 wideout with Blake Bortles throwing him passes.
Get this man a quarterback.
As a Chicago fan, I've been wishing for the same thing. So I hear you on that.
I just don't. I think it depends on the offense. Can necessarily the quarterback necessarily doesn't have to be great, right? But it leads into. The biggest thing I think is the team. So if a team's bad, they're going to be playing from behind a lot. That's how Blake Bortles ended up being a top 5 fantasy quarterback, playing on a terrible team because he's garbage time stats. But it's being an option. So TJ Hawkinson is the number one option right now. Who knows what Detroit does in the draft that he may be 1A or 1B option. Like Stephon Diggs, I don't think no matter what Buffalo does in the draft, he's coming in, he's going to be the clear-cut number one guy there.
I think that's a good point, too, because I think we forget that Kenny Golladay was injured for 11 games last year. So TJ Hawkinson was playing as the number one, and there's a really good chance that they add someone in the draft that could absolutely eat into some targets that were going to Hawkinson.
Volume is key when it comes to being a pass catcher at the end of the day. You guys made note of it. The quarterback can be a major factor, but at the same time, we've seen guys like Terry McLaurin in the past just do very good in fantasy with having poor quarterback play. So a lot of different factors when it comes to that. Again, that's why I like these scenario A versus scenario B, is because it kind of spirals out to some better points for fantasy purposes. So good talk with those two guys there. Let's go to sophomores. So we've mentioned some of these guys already in the podcast just from talking about other topics, but let's look at Justin Herbert and CeeDee Lamb. So I have a little bit difference of a finish between the two, but I'll tell you why in a second here. So Justin Herbert was the QB 10. He was one of two top 10 quarterbacks to not play 15 games. He played 14 games. He came in after the Tyrod Taylor lung issue out of nowhere after week 1 and then played from there. He was number 6 in passing. He was a top 10 guy, like I just said. CeeDee Lamb, wide receiver 20 from weeks 1 through 16. I always look just from weeks 1 through 16 for fantasy purposes. He was wide receiver 11, though, weeks 1 through 5 when he was with Dak Prescott. My question to you guys is, scenario A or scenario B, Justin Herbert finishes as the QB1 overall in 2021, or CeeDee Lamb finishes as a top 3 wide receiver in 2021. And the reason I have 1 versus 3 is just because of the depth of the wide receiver position. You got one quarterback and multiple wide receivers on a team. So is it Justin Herbert, QB1 overall, or CeeDee Lamb, top 3, 2021? And Jeremy, we can go to you with your opinion on this one.
I'm going
I like
to go.
I like that because it makes you think. That means you thought about it. I like it.
I did. I'm going to go with Justin Herbert, and I'm going to go with Justin Herbert being more likely to be QB1. I think it would be a lot harder for CeeDee Lamb to be wide receiver 3 with the depth that is the wide receiver position, and not just that, the depth issue that is his own team. You have Amari Cooper. You have, I'm assuming Zeke's going to be better with Dak back. You have Dak back. Like, there's a lot of touchdown opportunity. I think in order to get wide receiver 3, like top 3 for wide receivers, CeeDee Lamb is going to have to get double-digit touchdowns. And just with how heavy that offense is, I don't know if he necessarily gets it, whereas Justin Herbert, they're going to be slinging that rock all over the place. And off of that gives him the ability to get to QB1. So I'm gonna go with Justin Herbert. And it's not just because I'm a Chargers fan. I promise.
Oh yeah, we have to keep putting that factor
in
there.
mind. We have to keep that in mind.
When it comes to, so I think one of the points you were getting at is he has a lot of competition on his own team with, you said, Amari Cooper. He has Michael Gallup. Blake Jarwin's coming back from injury, and then Zeke's going to be involved. So that was one of the points you were getting at. Samantha, are you in agreement or disagreement that Justin Herbert has a better chance at QB1 versus CeeDee Lamb having a chance at as a top 3 wide receiver?
I'd like to start with saying that I think this is one of the least likely either one happening type scenarios of the list. And I think that for either one of them to happen, like there has to be some kind of injury or something like that. I'm going to lean with Lamb. So he almost broke 1,000 yards with Dak getting hurt 5 games into the season. Then he had to catch passes from Andy Dalton, Garrett Gilbert, and Ben DiNucci. And, Dak's finally got the long-term deal. I'm super happy for that. He's going to be there for a while. And while I think I mean, I think that Cooper would probably have to be injured for him to finish as wide receiver 3. I think that more people would have to be injured for Justin Herbert to finish as QB1. I think that he is absolutely a top tier quarterback, but there's so many guys up there that I just can't I can't wrap my mind around him finishing like above Patrick Mahomes. I don't think he's there yet, but I think he could get, to that point.
And with a guy like Patrick Mahomes, obviously he has the capacity to throw a ton of touchdowns in that offense with the likes of Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce and the way that offense operates. Other guys get a big bump because of their rushing ability. So that's going to be a big factor too, is if Justin Herbert uses the legs a little bit more. Not that he was a crazy rusher in college, but he actually did use his legs in college much more than he did in the NFL. And I think part of the reason was they had their other quarterback get hurt, and they probably wanted him to stay safe in that pocket. So that'll be an interesting factor too. Maybe a side question here. So again, I'll reread just the stat. Herbert, top 10 QB weeks 1 through 16. He did miss a week 1. CeeDee Lamb with Dak Prescott, wide receiver 11. I know it was only 5 weeks of football, but good start for a rookie. Do you see either one of these guys or both of them or neither taking a big fantasy jump in 2021, or should they be relatively around the same marks? Again, Herbert was 10, CeeDee Lamb was wide receiver 20. Any brief thoughts on that? And either one of you guys can jump in.
I mean, I think both are going to take a step forward just because, well, on the CeeDee Lamb side, his quarterback situation, assuming Dak doesn't get injured in like the first game, is going to be palpably better. That offense is, I mean, they have lots of problems on the other side of the ball, but that offense is really strong, and I think they're going to put up a lot of points. So I think like he's going to take a step forward. I was very interested. I was very impressed with what I saw there. I was also super impressed though with what I saw with Justin Herbert. I was not on the Justin Herbert hype train coming out of the draft. I thought he was kind of an unfinished product, and I certainly didn't think he was going to be starting by week 2. I don't think a lot of people thought he was going to be starting by week 2.
I don't think he did either.
Yeah, I don't think so either. What an unfortunate situation for Tyrod Taylor too. Like that man cannot catch a break. But so I think we'll certainly see him take a step forward too. I don't know if we're gonna like see that delta, that change from like where they were to top 3 or top 1 at the position, but I could definitely see like Herbert finishing as a top 5 quarterback, for instance.
You on the same boat, Jeremy?
Yeah, I'm in the same boat there. Like I think Herbert finishing 10, Lamb finishing 20. I think that's the floor for them both assuming that they don't like Herbert doesn't get hurt and Lamb and or Dak Prescott doesn't get hurt. Like I think as long as health considered, I think that's the floor for them. They're both in good offenses, and as long they're going to get the numbers. So.
All right. I want to make sure we get into, we'll go for about an hour here. So let's get into another topic while I have you guys here. Regression is a big topic for fantasy, especially when it comes to dynasty leagues. When a running back hits 25, 26, the thought is that they must be rolled out to the field because they're getting so old. And then when the likes of like a wide receiver or a tight end get over that 30 mark, the statements that come out are sell them while you can and things along those lines. So regression is a big part of it. Obviously, as you get older, a lot of guys do drop off a bit in fantasy. It doesn't always work out that way. Some guys have a consistent career throughout most of their fantasy tenures there. But my question to you guys is 2 guys here, Derrick Henry and Travis Kelce. I've heard a lot of different points about a potential for regression for dynasty leagues and if you should sell them or not. So the question here is, and we'll start with Jeremy, who is more likely to regress, to show some noticeable regressing in 2021? Is it Derrick Henry or Travis Kelce? So we got Derrick Henry, and I'll read it off. RB3 in 2020, RB7 in 2019. Kelce has been the tight end 1 from 2016 until now. So who do you think has more of a chance of regression?
I'm going to go Derrick Henry, and it's nothing necessarily against Derrick Henry or his talent or the talent that he has, because I don't think he's going to fall off of a cliff, right? But I think it'll be easier to, I don't want to say easier to contain him because he's a man amongst boys out there.
He was just doing push-ups with a chain on a Bosu ball, so I mean,
right, like he's built different, as the kids say, right? But
Oh,
I
That
think it's
photo
just
of him with Dion Lewis will live rent free in my head forever. Literally,
there
like
you go.
take your child to work day. That's what it looks like.
it makes no sense how big that man is. Like if I saw him, I would. You know what? You're right. You got it.
And I love that they're like the whole like Tractorcito season thing. Like I think I heard like an announcer say something like, "Oh well, like it's cold and no one wants to tackle him." I'm like, no one wants to tackle him ever. Like, what are you talking about?
I wouldn't want to tackle him if it was cold, warm, sunny. No, I don't want to. I don't want any parts of him.
On a quick side note, and then we'll go right back to you, Jeremy, before we get too sidetracked. I saw footage of him in like 8th grade. I think it was 8th grade, and this guy was like my size right now, and I'm not big. So I probably bigger. He was like my size right now in 8th grade, and it just was unfair. So getting to be an adult, and now he's looking at a linebacker square in the eye, and he's bigger than that guy. Man, that's just gotta be a long day. Like lacing up your shoes before a Derrick Henry game, like. He's gonna hit me. I'm gonna hit him, I guess. But no, go ahead though.
The game is built more for catching the ball, right? And so the fact that Derrick Henry does not catch the ball much, I believe, will lead him into a little bit of regression. Again, I don't think it's going to be much, but teams are going to force Ryan Tannehill to beat them. Try not to let Derrick Henry beat them as much. Travis Kelce, best offense in the NFL with the best quarterback in the NFL. He's getting 150 at least targets. He's can get open, So I think it'll be Derrick Henry, but I don't think it's going to be that though. So.
All right, Samantha, who has more of a chance of regression and noticeable regression in 2021? Is it Derrick Henry or Travis Kelce?
I think they both have pretty good regression potential, not significantly. I don't think Travis Kelce is going to finish as tight end 12, and I don't think that Derrick Henry is going to finish, as RB 20 or anything like that. But, Kelce did have 11 touchdowns last season, which is 6 higher than his previous season. We know kind of touchdowns are a little bit more random and harder to predict year to year. That said, I'm just going to go with Derrick Henry. I just think, like you said, Jeremy, that the league being way more passing oriented doesn't favor him. He had an egregious 2,027 rushing yards last season, and I just don't see a situation where that can be replicated very easily. That's 500 yards more than Dalvin Cook had, who finished second, and 500 more yards more than his previous seasons. So I think he's ridiculous. I think he's amazing and, just built different, as you said. But I could see there being a larger, a more significant scenario where he takes a little bit of a step back. But I think that, there's still a good chance he finishes as a top 3 running back or even top 2, and he still takes a step back. You know what I mean? That's still well within the realm of possibilities.
Yeah, that's kind of the point I was going to get to at the end of this, because I've seen just on Twitter floating around, some people will say these guys are prime candidates to sell high right now. But at the same time, a regression next year could mean instead of being top 3 or top 5, Derrick Henry is top 7. Is he still going to win you matchups? Absolutely. Travis Kelce, I think I had the number somewhere, finished well above 143 more points. We talked about TJ Hawkinson than the tight end 3 this past season from weeks 1 through 16. So even if he does regress, I mean, he's still clear above others. So again, regression is evident, but at the same time, it doesn't mean that it results in you having to sell guys in fantasy and dynasty. So I have a few more questions, and let's just run through these, and you give me your brief point for these before we close up the show here, because I had some interesting ones. I think I just have 3 left, so if we can just give quick answer and maybe a quick why, and we'll just run through these. So one is not necessarily fantasy related. It has to do with some teams changing. Washington football team 7-9 this past season. They won the division. Jets 2-14 did not win the division. Obviously, with that record, Washington adds Fitzpatrick, Curtis Samuel to their offense. Corey Davis, Keelan Cole, potentially new quarterback, Tevin Coleman to the Jets. So they both have some moving pieces going on. I know the Jets do have some good draft capital as well. What is more likely? Is it more likely, and just give me your brief answer here. Is it more likely Washington football team that they win the Super Bowl, or is it more likely that the Jets make the playoffs? So, Jeremy, which is more likely?
Washington winning the Super Bowl. The Jets, even they're gonna not be as bad, right? But they're still the third best, at best, the third best team in that division. Washington, I can conceivably see them winning the division. I don't think either is likely to happen, but if I got to pick one, I'm picking Washington to win the Super Bowl. Fitzmagic, baby, all day.
All right, so, Samantha, which is more likely? Washington wins the next Super Bowl or the Jets make the playoffs?
Washington for sure. I think they really, really impressed a lot of people, including myself last season with the defensive improvements. They've had a fantastic free agency so far, and they've got a lot of draft capital, a lot of cap space still left too. So that puts them well positioned, I think, for the rest of the offseason. And yeah, I mean, the Jets would have to wild card their way in, and I don't see that happening in the AFC. You just don't go from a 2-win team like Justin Fields, Zach Wilson, like whoever ends up being the quarterback there is not going to take them to that place yet. They're probably on like the 2-3 year plan. So, that's not saying that the Jets will never be good, but they're not going to make the playoffs this year.
Yeah, so it's not saying we believe either thing will happen here either, but Washington did have a great defense last year that a lot of people talked about, and now they add piece of the offense, so they have some potential there. So next one here, let's stay on the Super Bowl. Give me your one word just for this one. Tom Brady wins the next Super Bowl again, or Patrick Mahomes comes back and wins the next Super Bowl. Samantha, which one? If you had to throw $10 on it right now on DraftKings Sportsbook, what would it be?
Patrick Mahomes.
All right. Jeremy, do you agree or disagree?
100% agree.
Oh, okay. All right. So we're going rematch next year, potentially, with Patrick Mahomes winning it. All right. Last one here. So I threw this one on here just because it's such a weird situation with the Texans, but also there's things that can happen with Baltimore. Gus Edwards wins the job in Baltimore. And when I say win the job, I mean gets more carries. Let's just say gets more carries than J.K. Dobbins. Or Philip Lindsay wins the job. And I put Denver on the sheet, but that's not right. He's actually with the Texans now. So you have Lindsay versus David Johnson and Mark Ingram. You had Edwards versus Dobbins versus Lamar Jackson. So who's more likely to win the job in 2021? Is it Gus Edwards or is it Philip Lindsay? Jeremy, which guy would you have to put $1 on here?
Do I got to? Philip Lindsay.
He says pass. All right. Philip Lindsay over David Johnson. All right. Interesting. So, Samantha, if you had to put $1 on one of these guys, which one would it be?
Going with Lindsay. I really like J.K. Dobbins a lot, so I don't want to go with Gus Bus here. I think that the talent with Lindsay is certainly better than Edwards.
Yeah, Edwards 144 carries last season to Dobbins 134, but we saw a big shift to Dobbins second half of the season towards the tail end there. So I also do have some optimism for Dobbins there. Do you guys think either guy has a shot at all, Lindsay or Edwards?
I mean, it's possible with Lindsay. I think it's less possible with Edwards, but I don't know. I mean, anything can really happen. Like, I don't know. Running back committees get weird, and I think both could happen. So I don't know.
And you did make the point earlier before we get to Jeremy. You did make the point earlier that we get so surprised when it comes to who wins jobs and who performs well sometimes for that position. So comes into play there. Jeremy.
Yeah, the David Johnson thing, like. That wouldn't scare me, right? And I think, did Mark Ingram go there too? Like, Philip Lindsay is the most talented back of those three, but so injury concerns. If he stays healthy, I think he's the guy there.
All right. All right. Yeah. So again, the reason we went through this podcast here, it was a good way to talk about some different players and some potential situations. And yeah, it always makes for a good podcast just to have some fun talking about some different topics outside of the norm. So thank you both a ton for being on tonight. For me personally, it's been a long 2 days at the full-time job. So coming and talking about football is always a great way to kind of intervene on that week. So I want to make sure that we tell everybody where they can find you guys. We can start with Jeremy. Where can they find you on Twitter or social media in general?
On Twitter, hey, Mr. Holman. As I said at the start of the show, if you want, I will give you some sports stuff. But if you want chaos, that's what I'm here for. I'm here for the chaos. I'm here for the fun. But appreciate you having me on, Nick. Samantha, it was a pleasure being on with you too.
Yeah, and I do want to thank you, and I will attest to you as a follow. You're a great follow talking about football and just always cracking jokes and things like that. And again, congratulations on your wedding, man. That is awesome. That is awesome. So, Samantha, where could we find you on social media, and then anything else you want to plug to finish this podcast off?
Jeremy, I love that you describe your Twitter timeline as chaotic, because I would also say that too about my own, not yours. But yeah, very stream of consciousness. Don't stick to sports. There's a lot of stuff. There's snowboarding, there's food, whatever. But please follow me on Twitter at Samantha NFL. So that's really easy. And then I'm on pretty much every other platform at Sprevite. That's SPREVITE. So I'm on TikTok and Instagram and kind of all those things, just doing different types of content everywhere. But yeah, you'll also find just like a majority of all of my written content now on theactionnetwork.com. So I will just be doing all sorts of stuff for them now.
Yeah, and like I said at the beginning of the episode, big fan of yours, Samantha. Again, I love the diversity of content, whether it comes from videos or articles, or again, you have a diverse range of posting skiing videos and using Mean Girls as a reference to fantasy football, while on top of getting out good information. I think that's huge for the fantasy community, as being different when it comes to sharing thoughts. So do appreciate that. Big fan. Thank you guys again for listening, either live or on Apple or Spotify or any of those other streaming devices. We will probably be live again sometime Thursday or Friday. Again, Nick from P2W Fantasy, part of the Fantasy Points Media live group now as well. Check them out again at fantasypoints.com/subscribe, and you can use my promo code for an additional % off, 21WIN10. So have a nice night, everybody.